Good morning, everybody. So I wanted to talk a little bit about um, Dark Age of Man and the development process in general. Particularly, um, what is it we're looking for, not only in game but in playtest, right? And I don't mean what we expect from players. We want players to play, but what we hope to achieve in the playtest, I guess, right? So, for those of you who don't know my background, years ago I developed a tabletop football game. I had an idea to use the fast action card system, just like Status Pro series of Avalon sports games did in the 80s, 70s, and 80s. I therefore, knowing that was going to be the engine that would drive my sports sim, I then needed to sit down and determine the probabilities of what I was trying to achieve based on the number of plays that could be, or the play styles that could be implemented into the cards, and I wanted the game to be capable of being played solo in a very quick period of time. And so I sat down to figure out that deck of cards and the probabilities first. Once I got the probabilities of things occurring where I wanted them, then I had to go back and I had to edit the numbers of instances of yardage to try to create realistic, probabilities of yard results that would create realistic outcomes of ultimately professional football in a broad way, not one season, not one team, but a broad truth of pro football. And then, of course, I had to apply the team ratings and team charts so people could enjoy playing, teams of their favorite season or of the past, and how often those particular players would show up in the probabilities of a range of numbers occurring. And then you have to edit those. So eventually the deck is as good as you think it's going to be. And I could play test that privately over and over and over and over and over until I had the math where at least I was satisfied with it. But then there was the process of, now I have to show this to people. Now I have to sit down with Glenn or Freddie or my wife, and I have to say, we're going to play this thing. Jeff was I think the very first playtest I did was with Jeff, and of the 1997 version. And the one thing you can't account for is, what will players do, right, to your system? What will they call over and over and over to break your game? Or what will they do that you did not anticipate? Well, Jeff destroyed me something like 63-0, throwing bombs. Just bomb after bomb, and he would hit the touchdown or hit the big number, and he just destroyed me. And I had to go back to the drawing board. Okay, my bomb is too effective. It's too easy for every third card to get him a first down. And then, of course, by the fifth card, turns out to be a 46-yard pass, and boom, he's in the end zone. So that's why playtest is important, right? Jeff didn't call a realistic game of football, but he played like a player trying to win a game. And he broke my long bomb in the first version of Flash Football that I was ultimately thought was ready to rock and roll, which is why we have to playtest. So then I tweaked it, and I even found some of my original playtest documents of the very first 1997 Flash Football deck. And then the scores were really low, and I could see from the numbers I tallied in the margins that it was also producing too low of averages. And so I had to go back to the drawing board and get that fixed. Well, it led to version 1, and then the play testing, and then the most important process of that was then, what other things can I add to make it a better head-to-head game with your kid or with your buddy, in a defensive play calling mechanism or offensive formation mechanisms. And then, of course, the final stage was proofreading and writing not only a rule book that explains exactly how the game works, but in a legible, efficient way, so it wasn't cost prohibitive to produce playbook. And then, of course, make sure everything was covered, so my game could not fail somebody at home, right? When somebody gets your game in the mail, they look at the instructions, and if your simple 5 pages or 200 pages fail the players, fail those who are going to do your thing, then you've lost them, and they've never had a chance to enjoy the thing you've created and put in front of them properly, or to the best of their ability. And therefore, when you leave something out. And that led, of course, to my first addendum, which led to a second edition, right? After I was selling it, I was getting feedback, and that meant there were things that were just not explained, weren't as clear. And that led to the second edition with a rules addendum that explained some things that were clearly vague in what the card results would say versus how do we solve this. And therefore it led to the second edition, which is utterly finished and I was the most proud of, and that's the one that I mass produced and eventually sold out. So the gist of this is that's the only thing I've ever invented from one crazy night, 1996, with an idea for a thing that by 6 years later I was selling all over the world, and the process that I had to undergo to do that and to achieve. But I had something going for me that what we're doing with role playing doesn't exist, right? What do we know in role playing? Well, we know our past experiences. We know what we like as gamers. We know what we've run as GMs. We know what we want to achieve mathematically, or what we want to achieve in genre, or we want to achieve in, style, whatever, right? But that's all so vast and vague. In the tabletop sports realm, I knew what scores should look like. I could sit down and look at the averages of the last 50 years of a professional football game as far as offense and scoring production and yardage production and interception percentages and sack percent. And so I had the luxury of a truth that exists over the framework of 50 years versus of statistical performance. And therefore, if my deck produced something that resembled that, I at least achieved pro football in my game engine. Whether I achieved the kind of pro football a tabletop replay simulationist wants to play or not was not relevant. My game was designed to do a particular thing. There were better games for the simulationist to play, so to speak, the hardcore replay guy. So my game was meant to be played to achieve a particular thing, a particular way, with a particular attitude about that 30 minutes of your time, right? So I look at my document, and the number one issue here looks like I must be doing something that's spiking the mic. Okay, so I was pretty certain after Dale and I's very first solo game that it worked. Then he ran me, and it worked beautifully. So I knew math-wise when I made the first D12 version of this game that I actually play, and you can see that video on Dell's channel here, Roleplay Cafe, with Mark and Dell playing my old D12 version of this game. And the math is there. The math is so tight that we can't really mathematically break the game. And this is one of the reasons I wanted it this way, as an example. Is I want it that simple. I want somebody with a D20. If they've played Dungeons and Dragons, they can sit down to try our game with their D20, and that's all they're going to need. But also, for instance, we wanted magic to be contained within an imaginative space of the player, but mathematically could only have an effect on the game equal to everything else. So there's never a worry that magic's going to break the game, because magic can only achieve a thing. And as far as combat or wounding, it can only achieve a certain limited range of damage, wounds, etc. Okay, so we could be somewhat vague about spells and how magic, and leave it up to the player to in fiction create that. Do you see your character as a Merlin type character? Do you see your character as a burgeoning alchemist on the verge of discovering the value of mixing chemicals? Or is your character truly gifted with some divine, magical, supernatural abilities, etc.? It really doesn't matter, and they can't mathematically break the game, so to speak. Okay. So what you're looking for when you playtest. So I knew we could do one-on-one very easily, and of course with Dell, because Dell's thinking like I am. That's why we're developing this together, because we both want a certain play style, certain game that does a certain thing. Okay, then you want to invite a second body, and then a third body, and eventually you want a big normal 5-party crew to test the chaos of the narrative power of the players. So when somebody says, yeah, right, we get it, yeah, Jason, we don't like to play that way, or totally understand, right? There's many different styles of role-playing games, many different rule sets and genres for everybody. So it's not that we're trying to make a game for everybody. We're not making a universal game. We're making a particular type of system and a particular type of game for a particular kind of play style for that afternoon, or that session of that series of campaigns over the next 3 months or whatever. But the thing we need to play test, or the thing we we really do have to find out is how chaotic could it get? How mathematically cumbersome would it get if we had 5 players and they were in combat with 42 bandits? Right, we have a mob system, so the GM can readily put them into collective mobs to keep the to keep the chaos of the narrative fight down. Because remember, players narrate, and that directs an action. That action directs a dice roll to give us the result, and then we continue. It's that simple. So, we're at the next phase now of 2 things that I think really need to happen. One, another few play tests with 4 to 5 players, right? Hopefully 3 to 5 players. Again, seeing how the integrity of the fiction can stay together. The narrative, when all the players are providing their own narrative kind of vision of what's happening in the world or the scene. Okay, and number 2, we have yet to see if anyone else can run this the way we do it. Via the reading of our rulebook or even the conversation that we've had or the expression of how we're trying to do this, can another player pick up our game and be a naive narrator? Can they be the director, the naive narrator of our game, and not be held up by the lack of information or not want to railroad as they would traditionally do in a module, etc., etc.? Can other people run our game as successfully as Dell and I can run our game? And the only way we find that out is through allowing other people to have the book, which we've done in Dark Age of. And I have slowly kind of tightened up the rules and tried to clean everything up. Again, this is a beta version. This is not published ready, and by no means, and then at some point it will be about as ready as it's going to be, and that's when we'll hand it over to a professional proofreader, and we'll get the typeset, and voila, we'll hopefully have a finished rulebook. So for me, it's the book that is the biggest challenge, right? It's writing the rules in such a way that it's technical, that it's precise, that it's efficient, and that it's understandable by any player who would pick this thing up or any GM who would pick this thing up. And so to me, playtesting is the fun part. It's here we are playing our game, and Dell and I just know what we're trying to do, but does the book impart that to the players and to the GM? And then when it gets to the technical stuff, like how to roll dice and how to tally numbers and how to do damage and how to heal, etc., does it do that? So the book, for me, is the single toughest part. It is the bridge. It is the thing that communicates what we're trying to teach. It is the thing that communicates what we're trying to share with the world. And that in our medium, in our hobby, it's the most important thing. So the rules are it. They don't have Jason at their table to ask questions. They don't have Dell to ask questions. They don't have the luxury of texting the developer and saying, Jason, I'm having trouble understanding what you mean by blah blah blah. They can't. But I mean, in today's social media, you can almost do that with some developers, right? But the point is, if they lived in a small Scandinavian village hamlet, they bought it via the internet, and they get it in a PDF or whatever. They get it shipped to them in hardback, and they're sitting down with their buddies. Can they, without any other information, do what we're trying to do? So playtesting is valuable for us to see whether the integrity of the system, the integrity of play can hold up, whether other GMs, the integrity of what we're saying is true. You can too do this. You can give us a setting, a contextual setting with a goal, and then rely on a random seed generator and the players to drive the session whatever direction it goes, without any written material, without any railroading, right? True open sandbox, true live play, everything live, right? So can that be taught, and can others achieve it, right? Is what we're saying teachable? Is it doable? And again, you can't write for pardon me, but you can't write for those who are too stupid to understand what we're saying. You can't write for the moron or the ignoramus. You can't always teach certain things. There's a certain, it's like instinct. I've said before, some guys just have an instinct to handling D&D, some of it from 40 years of experience. Some of it, it's just instinctual, right? But then to say, well, you can't GM because you don't have those instincts, that's BS, right? That's what game books do. Game books say you don't have to be like Joe to be a good DM. You too can do this thing, right? And then over experience and time, they become intuitive with the system they're using, or they become intuitive in general as they have an epiphany they're not even aware of, etc., etc. So again, we're at this playtest stage now where it's about numbers, and it's about seeing if other people can run the game effectively and efficiently, and is it enjoyable to them? Because Dell, I will tell you, it's utterly the funnest I've had running anything in 40 years, and I'm liberated I'm free to be spontaneous. I could run a session, boom, right now for for 5 people with Dredgewater and one simple spark of a setup of what they are trying to achieve, and then jot down a handful of seeds, and boom, we're playing, right? And I am utterly comfortable in that. But many players, and certainly GMs, aren't going to be, right? Many GMs just can't do this. They're not seat of the pants. They don't welcome spontaneity. They might welcome spontaneity from players, right, with creative, imaginative things. They might welcome spontaneity of the random wandering monster roll. Hey, cool, it looks like a monster showing up. I can't wait to unleash it on the players right now. So there is spontaneity that exists even in a dungeon, even in the most rigid dungeon crawler module, right? There's some spontaneity. But we're talking about putting the GM in a seat, right, where there are rules, and there is some limit to what the GM can do and the players can do, but it's utterly unknown, as we are all naive, right? And can that be done? So the playtest takes this next turn, right? This next turn is more people and other people trying to run our game the way we say to run it. Make a random seed generator, because I can hand this over to Bill tomorrow, and Bill says, I want to run you guys through a game, and I say, that's awesome, and Bill sits down to actually run us through a dungeon crawl, and he's literally using a module or a dungeon crawl. And where is the random seed generator? Where is my agency as a player to tackle that thing that comes up randomly, or to ignore it, right? As Dell did with the king, the true king. You know, I rolled a random seed, the true king, and all it said was the true king's in town. And then I had to say, well, what is the true king? How is the true king in town? And I made him a king that had been run out by his uncle. His uncle murdered his father, the real king, and he's the prince, and he's on the run. And he's a misfit drunkard king, young prince. And Dell meets him, and he tells the story, and Dell decides that's nonsense. I don't believe you. I'm leaving. He walks away, leaves that seed unresolved. Turns out later Dell learns of his sister, and his sister's royal attitude convinces Dell, oh, he is the real king. And then it turns into another session, because Dell then said, wait a second, maybe this little girl should be taken care of. And it all came out of a seed that was generated on the fly by who is this true king, and what's this about? But I had to be spontaneous as to what that phrase meant, and what were the quick details that surrounded that phrase. I immediately thought that he looks like a vagrant drunkard who's been outcast by his uncle who wants him dead, and he drug his little sister with him to protect her, because his uncle would have killed her too. And turns out the little sister was so royal in her nature that Dell instantly was convinced, okay, we got a problem here, right? But that could have happened if it had been written, right? And this is the other thing I'd point out in the rules, that the random seed, the minute the GM decides what's true, the minute the GM rolls it and decides the truth of it, that is the truth, just like a written module, so it has the same weight and the same value as if something is pre-written, but it happens spontaneously, which puts the GM in a role of how, who, what, where, when, why, how. And I think I've discussed that with Dell pretty much ad infinitum, right? Okay, so again, where does that put us, right? It puts us at the next phase of playtesting, which is going to require more playtesting, in the sense that players start at level, let's say level repute 3, which is what the rule book suggests, and then can we campaign to see what players look like at 5, 6, 7, 10, and 10 repute, which was the highest possible repute you can have in the game, which would put you up there with popes, barons, dukes, kings, right? Maybe you aren't one of those things, but you would have that kind of weight of prestige, hopefully, or at least weight of power in the world. You may not have any prestige, but be such an unbelievable warrior that a king makes you his man-at-arms, right? And you are equal in advising the king, even though your prestige is a 0. You were literally a peasant with nothing, but you've won so many battles on behalf of the king that he makes you his man-at-arms. And the sessions take on a more sophisticated hierarchy of dealing with more sophisticated issues, as opposed to just slaying dragons or perusing dungeons for treasure so you can level up, right? Okay. So anyway, does it work, right? Can the rulebook be read and understand, and can you interpret it well enough to play it or run it? And then we go from there to, does this thing work the way we say it does? Does it liberate players like we want to? Is it fun? Does it feel right? And when it comes to system matters, as we can all tell you, those who love the OSR, myself included, those who grew up with D&D Moldvay, D&D Mincer, right? Moldvay and Mincer, the 2 red box sets, were the most important to me, and how we ran them. And I find out when I'm 40 years old, 38 years old, meeting Ivan and meeting other people on YouTube back in the day, 12 years ago, 11 years ago, meeting other grognards and finding out that we all love it for what it is, but many of us did not run it the same way. Many of us interpreted it differently or even ran it differently. I certainly did. I did not run it like I think Ivan was running his games necessarily. I did, but I didn't in many ways, right? If that makes sense. And that was the beautiful thing about role-playing, right? We all had the same rule book. We all had Red Box BX. Some of us were literal about it, followed it literally. Some of us used it as a guidebook and kind of like, well, we got to have something. And that was me. And that's where homebrews come from, right? That's why this I don't know how many people were ever literal about D&D. Many of us tweaked. Many of us said it's a guidebook. Many of us, honestly, cannibalized everything else out there around it and dumped it into our BX, which was me, right? I cannibalized stuff from AD&D. I cannibalized monster manuals. I cannibalized expert set stuff, and it became our table, our culture of play. And I'm not saying anything people haven't talked about before. I'm not saying anything here others haven't talked about or heard before. But in the process of game design, in the process of writing an actual manual for others to enjoy, that makes it worth their time, that makes it worth their, time to read it, their time to peruse it, their time to sit down and, get their buddies together to use it. And then their time in session, 2 hours later, did it achieve something for them different than normal? Was it as fun, or was it at least as fun, or was it more enjoyable, or was it a train wreck because there is not enough procedure, right? Okay, we've had great feedback just from some reading so far, which has been great. I've tried to clarify some of that, not yet fully. Like, for instance, some of the feedback on our naive narrator portion of the rulebook is exactly how many of these seeds do I need to flesh out, and exactly how does this function? So I got to go back and look, and I do explain all that, but I explain it in a more complicated long form. I write literally in paragraphs, and it's all in there, but you would have to go through with a highlighter and highlight where I'm basically giving the rule, right? So do I proceduralize that? Do I change the typesetting of that into bullet points? These are the things that you're going to be doing as a GM, as the director of our game with the random seed generator, and I highlight that. Or do I allow them to just read this information via written, and let them hopefully come away from that going, oh, I get it. This is kind of freewheeling, right? I don't know. These are the things too that's why you submit the book, and that's why you get people giving you feedback on the written material as well. I have a couple of major concerns about the book, and those major concerns, and I don't mean about our book, I mean about writing our rules, the minute I put it in and I write it in a procedure, it can be interpreted literally, and then we have players arguing over, no, those are procedures, we have to do them exactly as they're written here, or people never, and so they never do the game the other way, they never, right? Or they ignore it completely, and then why did we need to write it in there, right? So I'm worried about putting things in a procedural format because I'm worried it's going to become literal. It's going to become the procedure. And there will be many people who see it that way. Oh, there's a procedure for doing this, and it might become a very formulaic procedure as opposed to recognizing what it is. It is a random table. And it's how you apply that information and how you interpret that information on the fly that's important. It just says flood. That's it. There's no paragraph A, B on page 4 of the module that explains the flood. The flood will occur on the third morning of the party being there, and the flood is disastrous, and these are the challenges they're going to face in the flood. Boom, 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 boom. That's a module that walks you through handling the flood. Well, our game just says flood. What the hell does that mean? And the GM is naive, and he's got to kind of decide as he goes, or she goes, right? Pardon me, I don't mean to be biased here, but, and therefore, can we play test it? Can other people run this effectively and efficiently and be comfortable in that position? And only getting other people to run this with us, or getting people to run this and then give us feedback. That's what's gonna have to happen. So this has been fascinating for me because, number one, I've only ever worked with other human beings in music, right? So we had a band, and we wrote music together, and we performed together, and we published, we copywrote, and we published CDs together. And I only collaborated in music. When I invented my football game, I didn't collaborate with anyone. I shared it, and I play tested it, and that was it. And then there was some semblance of feedback from paying customers that I tweaked into second edition, and I would see that almost as a collaborative effort when they would say, dude, you've got to put quarterbacks in. And then I would work out how I can get quarterbacks into my team charts, and quarterbacks that wouldn't break the game but also would give them the quarterback ratings they need to have Joe Montana, because my game lacked any quarterbacks. And so that became almost collaborative when customers gave me feedback, and I had to recognize that feedback was legitimate. Some was legitimate, some was just picky, and some things I wasn't going to change, some things could change. And that became somewhat collaborative as I got feedback from paying customers, right? People that I really felt as a customer service person I needed to pay attention to as they purchased my game. I don't want our rule book to be like that, right? I don't want a role-playing game to be like that. I want it to stand on its own. I want it to be interpreted on its own. And I want players to feel free, ultimately, to either ignore it, use it, tweak it, but it needs to be written in such a way that they don't have to say to me, Jason, you should have put this in. Jason, why didn't you put this in? We need an addendum to the rules. You need to put out version 2 and fix camping. You need to put out version 2 and define magic better. And I want to make sure the book magic is defined appropriately for all levels of gamer, all levels of GM. I think the way we write it, it is, but it may not be for the mass audience, right? Especially if they're coming over from a game like D&D that defines magic. It is not. I mean, it's defined. It's defined in who can do it. It's defined in what they can do. It's defined in how they can do it. It's defined in the procedure of combat. It's defined in the procedure of play. It's a rule. It's a hard and fast set of rules. It's a tabletop game that people role play, right? Ours is a role-playing experience that has game elements, right? And anyway, that's it. I just wanted to share this because this is new for me, collaborating with Dell. And of course, sharing the beta this early with other people is something that I normally never would have done, right? I would have ultimately completed the game on the verge of publication and then shared it with a few people like I did Flash Football. And we really are sharing it in the beta stage, and that could be disastrous for us. All the material I've copywritten, poor man's copyright. I've sealed up all the written material, and I've mailed it to myself via the United States Postal Service and haven't opened it. So all of our information, everything is copywritten. That's not an issue. But it could be destroyed by by bad reputation. It could be destroyed by a couple of inept things. It could be destroyed by criticism, in which adversely affects Dell and I's mood about it, right? And we want criticism. We want that. But when you release something in a beta, there could be things that are critically evaluated that we would have figured that out ourselves, right? Given time. So that's the danger. But I've enjoyed the hell out of this experience. I cannot wait to play more. Period. But I'd play every single day of OSR if I was retired. I'd be running games or playing games. So this for us is we love the hobby. We love what we do. We love what we do with other systems that are similar to this, and therefore here's a chance for us to try to manifest it in something we can share that may or may not be the pathway for players to try this style of gaming, right? When I say try AIA and guys go, eh, they shrug and they'll never try it, and therefore they'll never get that feeling. Maybe this would be the game that somebody would try that would give them that feeling, it would give them that experience, and they just happen to like the way we write the rules, and they happen to like the very, very simple way we do it, or they happen to like the random seed generator, whatever the case may be. You don't know what might give players and GMs a path to a different way of what it's like at that table, or what it's like to have that kind of player agency, what it's like to have that kind of player fiat or control, etc., without breaking the game, without the game turning into chaos, hopefully. Right? Okay. As you all know, you have a culture of play at your table with your friends or your hobby, your group, your club. And there's a level of trust that usually should occur at a table, right? There should be a level of certain integrity to how we treat each other, a social contract, all those things exist. There's always that guy, right? There may always be that guy, or he's the person who pushes all the buttons, or the person who pushes all the rules, or the person who argues every point, or the person who goes that guy syndrome. He has to shine all the time, whatever. We've all had those experiences, right? And our game won't protect you from that. But our game invites that player to have an experience in which now it's almost okay, right? Because the rules aren't anything to argue, and they can shine as all equally can shine, right? Without breaking the game. And maybe one of the reasons people play this way, act up this way, is because they're bored, because they don't like what they're playing, but they can't find another game out there, or they can't find a fantasy game like this that allows this, right? If I want to play fantasy, I got to play that game, right? And I think some people act out because they're getting a certain experience that is frustrating for them, right? So, and again, we can't fix the ills of the world. We have no intention on ills of gaming. We have no intention of. So anyway, just an update. We're getting to the point like I said, where we're going to have to really think about typesetting. We're going to have to really think about a professional proofreading, a professional editor to get the thing ready. And then, of course, artwork. And then what? And our goal, I think Dell and I kind of agree on this. We've talked about this, is to release it as a POD, release it as pay what you want via Drive-Thru-RPG or something like that. But who knows, right? I mean, I would love to have a color hardback version, and our game is probably not worth it, because right now, front and back, depending on typesetting, font size, artwork, our game would be 10 pages long, right? 25 pages long. So how do you publish that in hard copy, right? But I'm a hard copy guy. I love PDFs exist, and I love the fact that I can get the PDF and the hard copy, carry the hard copy around, wear out the hard copy, but have the PDF available when I'm on my computer running a game, or when I need to look something up quickly while I'm making a video and I don't want to go dig the book out of the bookshelf or whatever. So, but I want a hard copy of our book as well, which is easy for me. I can just print it out, staple it, and I'm good to go. But anyway, that's kind of what I'm thinking. And again, we continue the playtest process. The next phase for me is a table of 4 to 6 players. that would be a big test, right? How many players can get the most joy out of this? Is there a sweet spot? Because I'm a sweet spot GM or a DM for D&D. My sweet spot in old school D20 gaming is 3 players. That's my sweet spot. I love 3 players, right? Or when I run traditional type of D&D, or even in 5th edition, the sweet spot for me is GM and 3 actual players. A sweet spot for Dark Age of Man could be 2 players, 3 players, 10 players. I don't know, and that's something better for number 2. Number 2, I want to play test a series of sessions in unison as a campaign. You know, session 0, they build their characters, and we set out on a campaign arc from anywhere from 4 to 20 sessions, whatever it is, to test the actual idea of the characters as they earn repute and affect the world, so to speak. And then finally, of course, the next experience is getting other people to run the game effectively and see if they like it, or if they can do it, or if it needs more information, or if it's too open, too vague. Those are the 3 phases. And then the 4th, of course, absolutely, bar none, is the actual book, because the book's all that matters, right? And what I say ad infinitum for the rest of my life about what I meant in my 1974 Dungeons & Dragons game is horseshit. The 1974 game was in the hands of how many people, or 1976 game was in the hands of how many people reading it, and either getting something or not getting something. It doesn't matter that 24 years later, in some obscure article, Gygax says, well, that's never what I meant. Great, from the horse's mouth. But it's when they dig it up in a time capsule in 2085, and not every word Gygax ever said about his game is not also in that time capsule. All we have is the textbook. The textbook. It is the thing, right? It is the thing. That's going to speak for that writer, that developer, long past dead, right? And then people will argue ad infinitum how Gary did it, what Gary meant. And Gary even said in 1982 article, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I don't care. I'm looking at his 78 homes, and I'm reading this rule, and I'm shrugging and going, is the collar literal, or is it figure? I mean, do we need it? Do we know? Well, I mean, I know I'm powerful enough to change it. I mean, I'm in control of my Holmes game. But what the hell is the collar really? And why do we need the collar really? And right, how does it apply to play really as a rule? Is this a suggestion or a rule? And if it is, how does it, right? Whatever the case may be, those are examples. But anyway, thanks for listening. Sorry if I bored you, but I wanted to bring you guys up to date on what we're doing. Okay, thank you. Good day.